Hi there. A few years ago, I was lucky enough to acquire a cast iron Bundt pan, and as an experiment, I used it to make an apple pie. Not a cake, but a pie made in a Bundt pan. It turned out well, and it was a lot of fun to make. And what's more, it didn't seem as though anyone else had ever used a Bundt pan to make an apple pie, and it was great to make a recipe that I could genuinely call my own. Now that Lodge has reintroduced its cast iron fluted cake pan, this is as good an excuse as any to make an apple pie in a Bundt pan. I hope you enjoy this, and perhaps you may want to try this yourself.
A large Bundt pan has much more space than a typical pie plate, so we need to make the equivalent of 2 pies for this. Anyway, this is a good excuse to play with an apple peeler, and even though Alton Brown may not like unitaskers, this is a lot of fun to play with. And all we need to do is mix in half a cup of sugar and let the apples drain and release some of their liquid. What we really need is a pie crust sturdy enough to stand on its own, which is why we're using suet in this crust. The other secret ingredient here is alcohol, which helps flavor the crust as well as controlling the amount of gluten and keeping the crust sturdy and flaky. All we need to do is mix the flour and suet and add spices to give the pie a good flavor. Now watch what happens when we mix together equal amounts of water and alcohol. The flour comes together but doesn't clump into a big mass of dough. However, when we add only a tablespoon or two of extra water, this happens. And we have a dough that's very thick and very easy to knead together. In fact, this is a lot thicker than your typical pie crust. We roll out 2 balls of dough and set one of them aside to use as the bottom crust. And now it's time to bring in a cast iron Bundt pan. We grease the entire inside of the pan with shortening. Then we roll the dough out and place it into the pan. It takes about 10 minutes or so to press the dough all around so it covers the entire inside of the pan. Be patient and take your time here because it will eventually take the shape you want. And the hard part is done. Now we can take the reserved apples and set the liquid aside to use later. All we need to do now is mix in the flavoring for the pie filling. It's only a matter of adding some extra flavoring to the apples, including a little apple cider, or alcohol, to give it a unique flavor different from most apple pies that use a ton of nutmeg and allspice. I've learned a couple of tricks for the pie filling, such as using cornstarch to keep the filling from having too much liquid. There will be a little liquid when the pie is turned out of the pan, so be ready for that. And we add the apples to the Bundt pan. Be sure to position the apples so they're lying mostly flat. The apples will soften and shrink as they bake, and we don't want there to be a huge empty space at the top of the pie when we cut it open. As we said, this is a very thick dough, and it won't roll out as flat as a typical pie crust. All we have to do is roll it enough to cover the entire bottom of the pie. Then we crimp the edges to help bring the corners together. Just fold and shape the dough around the edges and connect it to the top of the crust in the pan. This will be the bottom of the pie and no one will see it. And this egg wash is to seal the edges together rather than give it a good look, although it will look nice when it comes out of the oven. And the pie goes into a preheated oven to bake for an hour and 15 minutes. The longer time is necessary because this is twice the size of your typical pie. Our Bundt apple pie is done. And now the wait begins. The hard part is waiting for the pie to cool off.
An hour later, the pan is still warm. Grandma's original turkey board. Now we let this settle for 1 more hour. How do you lift a cast iron Bundt pan that is lying flat? Well, here's one way to do it. Ha-ha! Success! And introducing a Bundt apple pie.
And now, all we need to do is add a glaze to the pie, and this glaze will be in 2 parts. The first part will use the apple juice from earlier. We mix in powdered sugar and some cream, and also molasses to give it a darker color. This will give the pie a coating and harden to make it more solid and sturdy. Then, we prepare more typical glaze, using butter and more powdered sugar. Then, we add just a bit more of the alcohol to let it melt and become a proper glaze.
Oh yeah. Now this is a glaze.
And now at last, we're ready to serve an apple pie your guests will be certain to remember.
No matter what shape it is, nothing can beat the taste of a homemade apple pie. It's fun to make, and if you've never made one from scratch, you really need to give this a try. What's more, you may even want to try making this in a cast iron Bundt pan, and have an apple pie that will really stand out in a crowd. It's certainly worth the effort. Thank you for watching.